Coming to you from Burbank, California, this ain't no funeral home. It ain't the Terror Dome neither. This is the Film versus Film podcast, once again available on your podcast app every 7 days. I'm your host, Quinn Boys, and joining me, as always, in kicking off Season 4 is my co-host, Leonard Smith Jr. Leonard?
That wasn't the correct lead-in. You forgot the two-time reigning
It's
champion.
super. There's so much. I don't need to put all your titles in front of your name, Leonard. Go ahead. Tell us what you're proud of.
This is the season opener, beginning of Season 4. It's me, Leonard Smith Jr., your reigning champ. Very excited.
It's not 2 years. You won
2 seasons.
2 seasons. It has not been 2 years since I won the podcast.
Well, if you're listening now, we've officially been a podcast for over a year. So thank you for being here with us and listening. We have a very fun episode today, a very scary episode today. And I would never call him scary. I would call him funny. We have a great guy today. You've seen him on Shameless. You've seen him on Brooklyn Nine-Nine. You've seen him on Perry Mason. You've seen him everywhere. One of the funniest guys I've seen. Love him with Queen George. He's always doing great things. Peter Banifaz. How you doing, Peter?
Thank you, man. Appreciate that wonderful introduction, man. It's a pleasure to be here, fellas.
Thanks for joining us, Peter. Don't let Leonard's introduction sway your final, I don't know where you're at with either of these films, but he did tell me he was going to really butter you up when he introed you,
I can't tell you if it worked or not, but all I will say that whatever his choice is the right choice. Unless you got something nice to say to me, Quinn.
So we're starting Season 4. Leonard, we're in a predicament. It's October when this episode airs, yes. Probably.
Yes.
But we've done a Halloween movie before in the past. Peter, we have obviously different prompts each episode. We have one this week. It's Best Horror Movie. But we've done Best Halloween Movie. So maybe
Best Jason Movie.
We've done Best Jason Voorhees movie.
That was a bonus.
So we couldn't
episode.
pick one of those either. We've danced around this topic before. I think this is inevitable. We're going to start glancing over topics again. But this is Best Horror Movie. Leonard, what does that mean to you? And then you can talk about your pick.
Okay. I grew up loving horror movies as a kid. It was one of my favorite genres. I never was a really big action guy. I don't know. There's something about it. Maybe it was just because I saw it when I was young and I liked Halloween and I liked the Jason movies, but I really was all about, I was born in the 80s, so it was big slasher movie time. Scream was a big movie when I was a teenager. So, as I got older, I became more disinterested in horror movies, but they still, the classics hold that super nostalgic feel for me, so it's always fun. If it's October, I'm always watching horror movies. That's pretty much the only time I'm watching them, but if it's a good one comes out in theater, I'll go see it.
Peter, are you a big horror? I hope so, because we cleared this prompt with you before. But if you're afraid of horror movies, that would be bad for us. But are you a big horror movie guy?
I don't know what I'm doing here. I can't stand up. No, let me tell you, I love horror movies ever since I was a kid. When I used to when they used to have video stores, I'd go to the video store, the horror section, and just literally look at the tapes and look at the back, because my mom wouldn't let me watch any of them when I was a kid. But I love horror, man. Absolutely.
Maybe that's what gravitates us toward is the fact that as a kid you're not supposed to be watching these movies, or you kind of want to be I can handle this.
Yeah, it's horror and porn on that same level. You're not supposed to watch either as a kid. And
they have the same effect on me. Horror and porn.
How about you, Quinn? What is the horror genre?
You're just gonna let that go. All right, yes, I big horror movie guy. I think because the thing is, when I hear people be I had a friend in middle school who had one of those DVD racks that you put in the corner of your room, like a CD rack, and he had every Jason movie, all the Michael Myers, every Nightmare on Elm, all the Texas Chainsaw Massacres and stuff. And I used to, what you're saying, Peter, I would go to his house and we can't watch all of these. So I just look at the DVD cases and be Renee Zellweger's in this Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie? I got to make a mental note. But
wait, is this true?
I believe Renee Zellweger and Matthew McConaughey are in a later period, 90s Texas Chainsaw sequel.
What? I did not know that.
I could do some quick look this up and verify, but I know one of them is, if not both.
Okay.
McConaughey. Oh, he's in it, right? And he plays the leather face. And then at one point he's all right.
All right.
Which is amazing because it's before. I think that would mean it's before Dazed and Confused. So actually, that quote comes from Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation, which is what this movie is called.
He's like, I keep getting older.
Yeah.
And then I keep killing them. Like, I don't even know.
I know where you're trying to go with it.
Yeah, it didn't work. Okay, well, let's while he looks that up, let's talk about.
That's it. It's Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation. Renee Zellweger and Matthew McConaughey, and it came out in 1994.
Wow,
very good.
Okay,
I don't know that either of them played Leatherface, but yes, they're in it.
I'm surprised the teams haven't gotten to that yet. Nobody's. All right. Well, I'm gonna have to watch that now.
But yes, I was a big horror movie guy. I was afraid of them, but I feel like that's the point. Like, I wasn't someone who like loved it, but it is anxiety inducing. So I wouldn't watch them all the time. I wasn't going out to see every one. But if I heard, like, my pick, we'll talk about when we get to, but like if I heard about a movie that was really scary, I was like, I have to see it. There's like a dare element to a horror movie, like going on a roller coaster or something. It's like, I need to make myself uncomfortable and get through this movie.
Yeah, okay, so quick question for both of you. What was the movie that scared you the most as a child? Where you're like, I don't want to watch this, but I have to watch it. And, like, I'll start with me. The one for me was, there was two. One of them I didn't really like, but it was Chucky, was Child's Play. The Child's Play movies, mainly because my sister would torture me. She had like a little doll. She had like a tape of like
she had a Chucky doll?
It was like, there was like a Chucky tape with like his voice, and she would like, when she would like watch me, babysit me, she would like play it and like act like it was just like he was there. And then like, bro, I was always scared of Chucky. And then Nightmare on Elm Street. It was like, you can't go to sleep. It's like, you don't want to go to sleep because you're going to get murdered.
Nightmare on Elm Street, the concept scared the crap out of me, but I would always get too tired and fall asleep. So it wasn't the same. But sorry, Peter, what was yours?
Man, the thing is, it's like when I was a little kid, Ghostbusters scared the shit out of me. Like when
Ghostbusters, the Bill Murray comedy, just making sure.
Yes.
Okay.
I remember like the Slimer character would scare me and stuff like that. This is when I was like 4 or 5 probably. But I think the first horror movie that I was like, oh man, this shit is actually scary. And like I was scared but wanted to be scared. I think, man, it was. I also used to be scared of the show Unsolved Mysteries. So that shows you where I was when I was a kid. I think.
Yeah.
Do you Fire in the Sky? Do you all remember a film called Fire in the Sky?
Nah.
It was about these group of these men that get abducted by UFOs, and it's based on a true story or based on their accounts. And I remember that shit. I saw it and it scared the fucking shit out of me. I was more scared of UFOs and like ghosts than like boogeymen, like Halloween and stuff didn't scare me as much as like ghosts and UFOs.
Mm-hmm.
It was like the unknown, like things that could truly be in our world.
Yeah, and they'll come and fuck you up.
I'm with you a little bit, Peter. Like I could always compartmentalize. Like the slasher films were never quite as scary, even though I guess they're more plausible than like either of our two movies, Leonard, but
not more plausible than mine.
That's true. There's some evils in your film that are societal, but like I was never as afraid of like the Michael Myerses or the Jason Voorhees, but like so I loved Scream. That was an early horror movie for me that like scared me, but that was more like jump scare. And then once you watch it once, I'm like, I love this movie now, and I'm never really afraid of Scream again. But the movies that would fuck me up are.
You saying this makes me think of Aliens. The movie Aliens, the second one, both of them, Alien and Aliens, but when they're like just trapped on a ship, that suspense and just like, oh my God, that always got me.
Alien is like a haunted house. That's what they always would say is, right? It's like a haunted house movie in space. I mean, it definitely owes a lot to the horror genre. Okay. Plus that thing is creepy. All right, let's talk about let's talk about our picks.
Let's talk about our picks. One of us went a more, I feel like a traditional, maybe classic horror picks, and then me being me. The reason why we do this podcast is, the cultural blind spots and things like that. And Quinn hadn't seen my choice, and I was maybe thinking of going another route. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go with this because I've watched this movie so many goddamn times. It's a hood classic. It's all black people have seen this movie. It's Tales from the Hood. Not your traditional horror movie. It's more of like an anthology where there's multiple stories. There's 4 stories. These 3 gangbangers, drug dealers are going to pick up some drugs.
Yeah, classic drug dealers picking up from a mortuary premise. We've seen it before.
And we meet the
Too many
creepiest fucking mortician known to man, Clarence Williams III, and
He's so fucking good in it.
he's so fucking good, man. And he proceeds to tell them stories while they're like, all right, look, we're here to get tales
from the hood.
Tales from the hood while they're trying to procure these drugs. And they eventually learn the fourth story is about them. And all these stories hit home in the black community. They're all, and in, I feel like all communities, you know, there's talks of, they presented real things in a horror fashion with a twinge of comedy, because you gotta laugh sometimes to stop from crying. And you know, there's domestic violence, there's police brutality, there's racism in politics and whatnot. And I feel like they did a great job at delivering these stories.
Yeah. And I had not seen it, but before I talk about it, Peter, were you familiar with this movie?
Yeah, I remember seeing the film when it first came out in the theaters. So that's how old I am. Man, you know, at the time it was, I remember, you know, as a kid, like I didn't realize how actually important the film is. I just sort of, you look at it at face value. It's like this weird, you know, it's funny, it's scary. You know, I loved like gangster movies. I loved like quote unquote hood movies growing up. You know, we would watch like Boys in the Hood and Menace to Society and all that shit over and over again. So this suddenly like melded that a little bit along with the horror genre. And like you said, this sort of like comedy undertones, it was really enjoyable. It really wasn't until years later when I realized, oh man, this film is actually important and is making really good points. I wish that film would come out now. If that film had come out now, it would be very different. It would have been, at the time, it's like it came out during a time where it just sort of, I think a lot of people looked at it as face value of like, oh, horror film, without really like thinking about the implications. And yeah, I mean, the filmmakers, they did an incredible job of like really talking about important issues without it ever feeling like, I don't know, it never felt like, it never felt preachy. It felt just honest and scary and sad at the same time. But yeah.
One thing I didn't learn until bringing this back up for the episode is that Spike Lee produced this.
Yeah.
So that played a major part. David Alan Grier got to show his acting chops in this. Most people knew him as a comedian. But one of the issues, like you said, was the studio marketed it in a way where they didn't really want the like racial undertones and stuff. So people didn't really take it they took it at face value, basically. The way they marketed it, it didn't really have a chance at like people like really recognizing it for what it was.
Well, even when you watch the trailer, yeah, the trailer is just sort of like makes it seem, you know, that like this is just a horror movie. You know, it even makes it a little bit goofy in the trailer.
Yeah.
But yeah, it never like delved into the stuff they really talk about. And damn, David Alan Grier, like he's such a like funny, silly dude, but he plays this awful human being in it, and he plays it really well. And yeah, man, it's just it's interesting how they also apparently one of the directors was in a Spike Lee movie, and that's how they met, because the director started off as one of them started off as an actor, I guess, and then that's how they met. And then
exactly one of the writers, he plays the teacher.
Right.
Yeah, with the David Alan Grier story. It was really interesting to learn all these things after the fact, and when you're living in LA and you know the inner workings of things and how you meet people, and just like I was like, oh damn, this is dope that this like turned out. They got to make this movie, that it worked out the way that it did. Quinn, how did you feel about watching? You know, it was your first time seeing it.
Yeah, and I have to cop to it because I always cop to it when you give me movies that I've never seen. I never heard of this movie. Like, I don't know. I might have heard someone say like Tales from the Hood, but I had no conception. I don't remember. I have no memories of this movie because I'd never seen it, and I also had never really heard about it. So this was a treat for me. I was struck just on like the first thing I noticed when I watched it was, like you say, Leonard, it's 4 stories in one. It's what do they call it? It's an anthology movie, I guess. But there were like, it feels very old fashioned. It feels like, I I mean, is it are either of us familiar with Tales from the Crypt? Like, isn't that the whole idea? It's like these are different horror stories, you know.
Yes.
And what you're saying is true as well. It's a very interesting way to couch all these like racial injustices and domestic abuse and all these kind of heavy issues into what otherwise feels almost like a Halloween-y kind of, you know, they show up at a mortuary in the fall and leaves are falling and, you know, there's an old creepy guy who works there. Like, it feels very almost like Vincent Price, kind of hokey, but it's not. And even some of the stories that start out that way, like there's what's his name, Duke Metker, who's living in an old slave plant. He's a white, he's a politician, right? I just watched this movie last night. He's living on an old slave plantation where there are a bunch of dolls, creepy voodoo-like dolls, that, you know,
the souls of the old
are haunting him. The souls of the old slaves, yes.
These dolls.
And that should be, well, I guess when you say that they're souls of the old slaves, it's kind of heavy. But that idea, that premise feels very like, you know, Twilight Zone almost, something like that. But it's very serious. And that last story about Crazy K, the gangbanger who has a K shaved into his head, which I feel like that's very nice. I don't know if we made that movie today that they'd shave a K into his hairline, but
I don't know. You seen Drake? You seen Drake with the heart in his hair? So maybe
it all works. You're absolutely right.
He's brought it back.
But that was like by the end of the movie, because when like the first story is about some rogue cops beating a black man to death and then framing him and pushing his car into and then the ghost of that man coming back to haunt the cops. Just to quickly sum it up, there's some stuff in between about one of the cops getting grabbed by his dick and pulled into a grave after his head is bludgeoned against a urine-soaked tombstone, but those are just details. It's about racial injustice. And I was like, is this the right movie? Does the movie have the tone to tell this like appropriately? I wasn't sure. But then by the last story, which is about Crazy K, which is about a gangbanger who, in his last moment, in his twilight moment before he's killed, has this like fantasy, this haunting where he's undergoing like a reprogramming, and they're intercutting his life as a gangbanger with like, I assume, real images of hangings throughout history. Yeah. And I was like watching the movie and it was almost like there's also a blinking light effect that I thought was going to trigger epilepsy in me. That I don't have epilepsy, but that scene went on for so long. I was just constantly blinking. I was like
2.5 minutes long.
Getting a little bit sick. But the scene itself before, where he's like kind of going through the programming, was so powerful because I didn't realize until well after they had shown. I'm like, shit, these are real. They're not faking these images. You can tell. And it's fucked up. And so it doesn't really matter. Like at first I was like, I don't know if this tone works, but then I was like, they're just doing it. And I appreciated that. I enjoyed this movie a lot. I felt a lot of different things while watching it.
Oh.
That scene is so fucking intense.
Yeah.
And when he's spinning around and that thing, I mean, I kept thinking about the performer, like as the actor himself. I'm like, man, this is not a comfortable scene to be shooting. And then some of the images are incredibly disturbing because you can see they're clearly real images.
Mm-hmm.
It's like this film felt less scary, and more psychologically sort of disturbing, because it's so real. I mean, that scene where the police are beating that man was really fucking disturbing. Yeah. And because, I grew up in LA, so we all were greatly affected by the Rodney King beating, and we've seen this. And I believe that this was way after the Rodney King beating, right?
This movie was 95, so it was a few years after, but also like in terms of the development, it maybe was still inspired by.
I mean, that was a very traumatic thing for people I'm sure all over the country, but in LA, and then when the riots happened, I mean, this came out during a time where like things were very fucking sensitive and people were constantly scared that there'll be another riot. Because I remember those riots, and I lived like 20 miles away from the epicenter of those riots, and there was still stuff going on in my neighborhood, in our area. And I don't know, this almost felt like this film really plays with fire because it was really bringing up things that we were all still scared of that just happened a couple of years back, especially in LA. I feel like it had impact.
Also, the OJ case was going on, so there was a lot of racial tension at that time too. So
what we were so pissed off about what happened with just sort of Rodney King and everything like that I remember when the day that they acquitted OJ, in class and school, we all cheered because we were fully like of the notion that like the LAPD like framed him and this and that. And we thought like it was, this is justice. And then years looking back, I'm like, oh, no, that guy killed 2 people.
Yeah. It's wild. It's wild how that case got turned into kind of like a divider of the country. Like, as black people, you just wanted to see a black man beat the system, even though he literally was a murderer. Like,
it's just, I think, extremes cause other extremes, right? Like what happened with Rodney King situation and the subsequent riots immediately after, people were like, hey, fuck this. We're not gonna let this happen again. But like hindsight is 2020. Looking back, you're like, oh shit, that was they just took full advantage of the times. And that's how OJ, OJ all day.
Well, you bring up an interesting point, Peter, and I feel like everything that we've been saying so far is in support of this, but like the movie has a lot to say to whoever watches it, but it also struck me, I think, around the time of the 3rd story, which is the Duke Mecker, the dolls in the house. This is a movie that was very rare at the time. It still feels rare. But it was a movie that felt like this is horror stories for black people, if I might. Leonard, you can support it or not. But like I don't think there's like a white, and I'm not saying I'm not lodging a complaint, but I don't think there's a white character in this movie that is not like a racist or like to be trusted or like openly antagonistic to the protagonists in each story, which are always black characters. And I feel like I don't think that's the movie taking a stance on white people. I think it's like we're making a horror movie about kind of the black experience in America, more specifically the black experience in the hood. What is the fear there? It's cops. It's not to say that other minorities don't have reason to fear police or what, but it's like, what is the specific black experience? What would you be afraid of? And it's like old racist dudes who live in plantations who are, don't have the best interests of everyone, old Klansmen basically, or it's like corrupt cops or whatever. And I don't think the movie, the reprogramming story, the woman who is kind of doing it to Crazy K is a black woman. Again, I don't think that the movie has any kind of vendetta, but it just made sense to me where it's like, yeah, that would be what people might fear in a horror movie.
They also, there's a lot of commentary on the fact that black people will subscribe and will partake in this racism as long as they can get ahead. And you see like the light-skinned black dude who was in Do the Right Thing, who's been in a few of our movies, in all of my movies, basically all about the Benjamins. W.D. Du Bois, I can't remember his name right now.
I do not think it's W.E.B. Du Bois, but let's find out.
It's something weird like that. But like they all get done wrong. Like the black dude still, the black cop still, like it's like they all have I can't think of the word right now, but
he gets his comeuppance. Like it's you think like he's gonna get away scot-free, but the black cop basically, it's almost like they got him back too for turning his back on his own
exactly
and whatnot. To me, the one part that I thought was the most, it's a powerful movie for me, but the most powerful was really the last story, which is really about black on black violence and like what it does and like the harm of it and everything like that. Again, back in the days when I was a kid, I was like, I didn't get that. I just looked at it as oh, this is an interesting scene. But like watching it again now as a grown ass adult, it's like, you're like, oh wow, this last scene is so disturbing because the idea of this type of violence in inter-communities like this is like very, very disturbing and very destructive.
And it's kind of something that, through time has been programmed and like we've been desensitized to like not caring about the violence that we wreak upon each other and stuff. And it's just, it is pretty jarring, and it's like, damn, like what are we doing? And you know what's funny? I don't know if this movie, played a part in that, but ever since I was a child, I hated LA. I never understood gang culture and people killing each other over like turf or where they lived. It never made sense to me until obviously I got older and I learned about things.
And now you're pro gang.
And now you're very pro. You're very pro death.
I'm
Right?
in a gang right now.
Every time we have a minor dispute, Leonard's going to his trunk and he's getting.
I just never got it, but obviously I love LA now and I understand it. But maybe seeing things like this, it just made me so upset as a kid and be like, why are we doing this to each other?
Can't
like,
we all just get along?
Yeah.
Well, the balls also to go from that story, that last story that you just mentioned again, Peter, to then back to the mortuary. I'm the literal devil. Like
you guys are
again,
in hell,
like
you died.
It's
in that
whiplash
shootout.
with like the tone kind of. Yeah, I do like how they eventually sew it back into. Because there is the framing device of him just being like, I'll get you your drugs, but first you have to listen to my stories. And these guys are like, okay, all right, whatever. Like he must have. How good do you think the stuff is that he has that they're picking up? Do they ever say what specifically?
No. But I mean, he's the devil. He's got to have the best of the best.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot to put up with.
It's drugs you do. You instantly OD as soon as you do these.
Right.
Drugs.
It's just pure fentanyl. He's just giving pure fentanyl.
That's all.
I feel like this guy, they're like, first of all, this guy's immediate. We know he's been using. So let's get the drugs from him so he cannot continue to clearly take from our supply. And we'll just listen to his stories along the way.
Yeah. I feel like we've talked about my movie a lot, but I'm sure our listeners, yeah, Seattle, Washington. But I just want to say, I'm sure a lot of our listeners haven't seen this movie, so check it out. I'm sure everybody has seen Quinn's Pick. It's a classic. It's super popular. It's a great movie. But if you haven't seen Tales from the Hood, check it out. It's a great movie.
And if you have seen The Ring, but not in a while, maybe watch it again like I did, because I gave this movie. I thought long and hard about. I botched the what was one we did with like movie that blew our mind or scared the crap out of us or something, and I gave you Signs.
Oh,
and I was being too
mind
honest.
Blown. Mind fuck.
I was being too honest with myself. It's like that was where I was at the time, and Signs scared the crap out of me. But if you look back on it now, to put the Mel Gibson of it all aside, it's not that scary. The Ring was another movie. I was born in the 90s. The Ring was like just when I was starting to watch horror movies, and it was a total word of mouth thing. I understand that this movie was a hit, but I did not see it in theaters. It was a home video situation for me. And I had just heard that it was, to some people, one of the scariest horror movies ever. And we could talk about influence, and we will a little bit later, but like kind of kicked off the fascination with like Japanese horror in the US. This kicked off a whole bunch of remakes, and also I just think the tropes, the little scary girl with the hair over her eyes. I'm not saying it invented it, but it certainly popularized it in America. Anecdotally, most people know the story of The Ring. You watch a videotape.
You get a phone call. It says 7 days. 7 days later, a little girl comes out of a well through your TV, and you die. And we'll get more into the plot. But what scared me about it wasn't that concept. We had family friends growing up, and the father of this family unit, I just found he was a hardcore sleepwalker. And so, like, there would always be funny stories that we'd hear over, like, when we get together for Sunday dinners, or, like, his wife, or they'd be like, yeah, we found Jeff, and he was down at the refrigerator just standing there asleep with the door open because he was sleepwalking, and he went down to, like, half make a sandwich, and then he, like, clocked out, whatever. So there were all these stories about him sleepwalking around the house. After he saw The Ring, he stopped sleepwalking for a month. That's not a conscious choice that you can make, Leonard. He was afraid of the movie so much that it stopped his subconscious. He no longer sleptwalked for a period of time. That's what when I heard that, I was like, I got to see this movie. And at the time, and I still think rewatching it, it holds up both as a good film with a kind of creepy, consistent tone, vibe throughout. We were talking about how, for good or for ill, Tales from the Hood's a little bit all over the place. The Ring is like, knows what it is. It's very creepy. From the first scene with the young Amber Tamblyn, where she's watched the tape and it's the seventh night and she's at her home alone with a friend, you know what the movie is. And I think that it does a lot of impressive things for horror movies. It doesn't show that much. It's a lot is left to like inference or quick cuts. There aren't a ton of jump scares. Like they'll do like the phone rings from the other room and they're startled, but like it all feels earned and part of the weird
rich mythology of this movie. Like, there's no reason that a zombie girl should have a videotape that you watch and then you got to make a copy to transfer the thing. Who cares? It's scary and it's creepy, and I want to know what the rules are. I don't care why they're the rules. So that's why I picked this movie. Peter, what was your experience, if any, with this movie before we gave it to you?
When I first saw this movie, I thought this is definitely one of the scariest movies I've ever seen. And I do think it completely changed horror movies. Like the whole Conjuring style films and the whole like jump scares and all that stuff, like that really started in the 2000s. I feel like all came from this film. Like the whole Blumhouse kind of type films really, I feel like came from this. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, none of it makes sense. Like,
no,
like the video, it makes no sense why it's in a video, but it's just scary and weird as fuck. And I saw it in the theater, and I remember just being like, damn, this is a very, very creepy, well-made film. And yeah, there's no like blood and guts in it, really. There's no like, I don't know. There's really no violence in it. It's just disturbing and creepy, but there's some pretty good jump scares in it, though.
Yeah,
there's definitely some, like, especially in the beginning and then towards the end. Yeah, it's like I don't know. I really dug it, man. It's definitely to this day one of my favorite horror movies.
It stars Naomi Watts, who everyone listening to this podcast probably knows, but she was, I feel like, on the up. I feel like this movie really, she'd been in things before, but this was like Naomi Watts, and she's great in it. It's a good story on its own. There's a good, like, she's a journalist, so she's trying to find out the origins of the tape, but it works to keep the plot going. I will give it points off because I think it inspired a lot of things. I think it brought back from, like, The Omen, the kind of precocious, creepy child thing, which got played out
I was
a
just
lot.
about to say that kid was creepy as fuck, man.
I don't think he's a Culkin, but he feels like one of the other Culkin, the non-Macaulay Culkins. Like, he's just a very creepy little boy who they often have in a suit, so he looks like a little man, just walking around and doing shit, and like calling his mom Rachel.
Too, and it wasn't really that he actually was like his. It wasn't like actually he was creepy, but there was just a weird energy because like nothing he did.
He's monotone. He's flat. Everything he says is like very.
I mean, I want to see the casting breakdown for this kid. It's like, is your child strange, unlikable?
Does he have bags under his eyes?
I feel like the casting director just when they had all the kids come in, they just had a cat in the room, and the first one that made the cat like jump up onto the windowsill and arch its back. They're like, you're in. Like, I feel like there must be animals are weirded out by him. Like, crickets stop chirping when he enters. There's got to be some quality that he had.
Yeah, he's right. Also, this kid did have bags. Like, what little child has bags under their eyes? Like,
well, famously, they kept him up. He never sleeps over the course of that movie. It was like a thing where they adopted him from a country where the child labor laws, and they filmed like just in international waters, so they could keep him awake just to really get that performance.
They only had him for about a week and a half, so they had to there was no sleeping for him.
Yeah. I was like, all right, we're ready for the tired child now. Okay. This scene, you're going to, wake up.
Yeah. Every moment they felt cut, he would just go straight to sleep until they needed him next.
I hadn't watched this movie.
How recently had you seen it before I gave it to you? Because for me, it had been like 10 years.
I want to say like 15 years ago or something. Mm-hmm. It had been a long time. This movie really wasn't one of my favorites. It was around this time was around the time where I was kind of getting over horror movies, and I was kind of like, all right, and I really started going hard on just like comedies and thrillers and sci-fi, which I'm really big on. But yeah, it's almost like a creepy like detective noir like movie, and the first scene is scary as fuck.
I would put it up with like the first scene. I'm not saying it's better, but it to me, in my mind, it's like the first scene from Scream. And there's actually a lot of similarities to the first scene from Scream, but also just like this is the movie in a microcosm, this thrilling first scene that doesn't really extend to the rest of the film, but like it's its own short story that tells you about what we're dealing with.
Yeah, it's like the pre
just sort of both those films made the phone ringing a scary thing. Like
and
the phone rings and then suddenly the camera zooms in on the phone,
mm-hmm.
and it's like, hello? Right.
And those like this movie came out in 2002, so I guess those turn of the century clunky house landline phones without the cord, like you're walking around there, like what you're saying, Peter, like the beeps of the phone and like there's a lot of sound aesthetics that I associate with this movie, and I think we were talking about this in something else, but like this was maybe this is another points off thing, but like The Matrix a few years prior had kind of pioneered or popularized the idea of tinting your movie. Like when they're in the Matrix, it's slightly tinted green. This movie like takes those levers and just pushes them all the way out. This movie is green
blue and
like,
gray, kind of like,
and gray. Yeah, there's no primary colors. It feels like
that's what I was about to get at. Is like overall the whole movie isn't necessarily like very scary, but all the aesthetics of the film is just creepy and just like a little like off-putting, a little just like what is. Yeah, it was very gray, and like all the set designs and like the outdoor shots and like the shot of them going into that cabin, that creepy ass like that wide angle shot of them walking up to the cabin. I was like, damn, this is such a dope creepy shot. Like the direction was great. I wouldn't say I like felt scared a lot of the time. A lot of the time I was like, what is going on? What's happening? Like what, does this little girl have a cell phone in that well? Who's making
yeah,
this
so you're thinking about
that was the main
actually,
thing you were thinking about.
what's the recept? How many bars
How many
down
bars
in the
does
well?
she have?
Where do you charge it? It's wet down there. You don't want to get it wet.
But
Like, we don't have. I barely have service above ground. This little girl is like doing anything, calling anybody.
That's one of those things, those choices I'm glad they didn't make, which they could have done, which if they, because she's researching it, but it's like, it's scarier that you don't know. Like shot where she watches the tape first, she gets the phone call. She then is like, I got to show this to my ex, as you do. She shows it to her ex, the child's father, and he watches it and he's like, okay, whatever. And then her son watches it and they don't answer the phone one of the times, and it's so fun. It's such a funny shot, and also so like of that era where there's just a pan like reveal shot where she's looking at the voicemail and you just see like one, which means that she's got a voicemail from this ghost. And I'm just thinking about the ghost, and then it's like, you have reached Rachel. I'm not here right now. Please, like it's just going through the things, and then it's like, press pound for more. It's like, I don't need that. Just let me get to it where it beeps so I can say 7 days and hang up and then go back to being dead. I think those are the things I knew that you would be thinking about, Leonard.
I'm so weird. I'm sorry. I can't help it. But honestly, surprisingly, during this movie, I wasn't thinking about that too much. It was more kind of like an after the fact, because it was just, a lot of the shots, and I did also think, I was like, who shot this? Who produced this film?
Yeah, again,
who made this movie?
Not the point. She didn't hire a crew. There wasn't like a guy getting Foley. This wasn't a craft services table. It was her mind. It's images from her mind. Can we talk about the tape? Is the tape scary or fucked up watching it now? Peter, did it have any effect on you? I mean,
I've seen the movie a few times, and so like it doesn't have the same like scary effect. It's just weird. The tape just makes no fucking sense. It's just very creepy. It feels like the way dreams are weird. Like nothing makes sense. Things are just flowing into each other. Everything's supposed to be symbolic of something else, kind of, and it's dark and it's silent and. Yeah, I guess it is pretty creepy. It's still pretty creepy.
I feel like every time I see the movie, I notice a new thing. Like this time, I never realized, or maybe I realized way back and forgot, but I think more likely my brain was protecting me from processing the box full of shivering fingers, like severed shivering fingers in a box. I was like, that's fucked up. I didn't remember
that. Yeah. My thought process was, I was like, damn, how did they get that done in 2002? That looked really real. Like,
I hope that's CGI. Or the one, the wide shot of, it's like static or it's something, and then it wipes away, and it's mimicking the shot, and it's a bunch of bodies like writhing around in black water shot from above. I was like, I never realized that. There's a lot of subliminal type things.
It was something at first. It was like worm. It was maggots. It was maggots, and then it turned into humans, and I was like. I was like, damn, that shot, that's a crazy fucking
You were like, how did
shot.
they get this shot? Did they use a drone?
Well, no, I was thinking about the actual production. I was like, because, it's 2002, so it's like, they had to, in some type of physical capacity, at least have 5 to 10 people do that. And then, it was just good. It was just well done.
You just, throughout the whole thing, just had questions of, like, their cinematography, basically.
A little bit.
Leonard's like, I think this part of the videotape is day for night. I don't think that this.
I was like her lover, her ex lover, where he's like, oh, that was a good student film. You know, it just felt like it had a student film vibe.
Well, that's what the guy. That's Noah, her
Yeah.
ex. So he's like, very student film, and I was like, it does sort of feel like this is George Milieu, or like the eye getting sliced with a razor. There's like some of those things where like the fingernail on the nail. Yeah, there's a lot of those like, ugh, like they're trying to get you kind of things. Which
I
feels
hated
like a
how
student film.
nonchalant he was about it, though. I was, because if I saw that in person and like someone showed me like, yo, where the fuck did you get this tape? Why the fuck did you show it to me? Like what?
This isn't porn. I also love, again, the weird mythology of this movie, that it's just, she finds it at I almost said a bed and breakfast, at like a cabin lodge, and it's just sitting there in the rack of VHSs that we all have or used to have or have seen, where you can just rent it, and it's the only one without a case, and it's probably next to like Homeward Bound. I should have freeze framed and looked at what some of the other movies are. So the fact that it's so innocently placed there so that you might accidentally pick it up and put it in is, I appreciate those little touches.
I also appreciate the fact that at the end with the reveal of the copy, in your mind when she's making the copy, you're like, why the fuck are you making a copy of this tape? Like, why are you doing this? Why would you? And then it ends up being her
salvation.
Saving grace, yeah.
Yeah. Peter, were there any other specific thoughts about this movie? Or I guess we've covered it pretty well now, and we can start to go into other parts of it. But was there anything about this other that we haven't touched about on this movie?
Just the fact that one of the most horrible scenes for me is when she starts pulling that hair necklace thing out of her throat.
I had that
was
written
fucking
down.
Gross, yeah. And pulled something out of her eye too. Was that the same movie, or maybe that was another movie?
I think that's a different movie, but I still remember, because again, Naomi Watts is very good in this movie.
Yeah.
She really acts that gagging of pulling that long black, it looks like a sewing thread out of her mouth, and it's a long hair, and that felt like they maybe got a note where someone's like, okay, you got 7 days, the little girl's not showing up, put a dream sequence in there, because like to remind us that this is a scary movie. But it works. I'm grossed out by that scene.
It's disgusting. Yeah,
It was gross. And then that little censor at the end, it was like, oh fuck. Ugh.
I love the ending of this movie. We've talked about the ending of your movie, but I love the idea that, like, I don't know, I'm not sure what the commentary on it, but the idea that like you can only get out of it by passing it on. Like you have to, there is no escape other than just perpetuating it and making more copies. It's a pyramid scheme. The videotape is a pyramid scheme. You have to make it, and you have to find one person and give it to them, and then they have to make a copy, and so all of a sudden there's hundreds of these tapes out there in the world.
Or it could end with one person. You show it to that person.
Yeah, but that person's not going to be me. I remember thinking, did you ever think through the scenarios when you were a kid? And this is so fucked up. Like, this is a fucked up thing.
Who would
that
you
I
show the
shouldn't
tape
do.
to?
I was like, I would find someone, and this is fucked up. I'm acknowledging it up front. I would find someone on death row. I would find a way to organize a kind of a one-on-one with this person, hoping they'd just
You would get into a federal penitentiary.
Yeah, and I would wheel in like a
tape.
substitute teacher TV on a cart, and I'd be like, listen, you're going anyway. In fact, the governor's going to pull the switch tomorrow. So watch this tape, and hopefully like you'll be cursed, and Samara won't know what to do or where to go if you're already dead. But I can pass this along like an STD that you don't want. You're just kicking it down the road. It's fucked up. It makes you do fucked up things.
Here's the question, though. Do you have to make a copy and then show it to someone, or do you just have to make a copy?
I don't know.
That's a good
I feel like
question.
you have to show it to someone.
Okay. I feel like that's...
Peter, do you have any tricks? How would you get out of it? If you've watched the tape, you get the phone call, and are you just going to take one for the team and die, or are you going to wriggle out of it?
I'm gonna try my best to on the phone. Like, I'm sorry, I didn't do it. I'm just picking up the phone. I'm just here watching my friend's house. No, what 7 days?
You just
no,
deny it. I like that.
I'm too busy. I can't die in 7 days. No, I don't know what I do. I'd be scared shitless, and I would probably try to get rid of the tape, hoping that I don't know. I
bury it?
fucked. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. Wait, so if
I think you could
chose-
hot potato it, like let's say the three of us. I watch it. I wait until like the 5th day. Like Leonard, I just made a copy. You watch it. Leonard waits a week, and then he gives it to you, Peter. It's like, roommates sharing a Netflix account. Or something. Like, let's just all kick it down the road. Make sure none of us go 7 days. Like, really don't forget, guys. And then she'll never be able to get to us.
I would have been fucked because I would have destroyed that tape as soon as I watched it. I would have been like, I am destroying this. I wouldn't have had the chance to make a copy. I would have just been like, fuck this.
And you would have watched the tape. I know that for a fact. Peter, on an earlier episode of this podcast, Leonard gave me the movie Working Girl. And he said that he saw it because his mom had a VHS copy, a homemade tape of it that she'd written Working Girl on it. And Leonard, thinking it was porn, popped it. Why your mom would have a porn called Working Girl in her room, and why you would want to watch it, not clear.
We had a lot of VHS.
We have a better chance of understanding how Samara made that videotape than why you would watch that
porn,
movie.
It's going to be porn taped off HBO.
Oh, you thought it was the movie Work It Girl.
Exactly. I worked it. I made do of what.
Oh, you still found a way to masturbate to it. That's inspiring.
The vacuum scene. The vacuum scene. Anyways, enough of that.
I'm just saying, if you would watch the tape. You would watch the tape. You would be that scene where Naomi Watts sees that her son has watched it, and she's like, "No!" And that you would be that person.
I would have been like, "Hey, son, let's go to Vegas. We're about to party hard for the next 4 days. We're going at it. We're going hard."
But also, what does Naomi Watts think? I guess the movie kind of shows that she's a little bit not the most on it mother, but it's like, you just leave that thing in the VCR. He's gonna put it on thinking it's like Paw Patrol.
She was tripping
and fuck himself up.
She was tripping. I do think that what was great is like the way to stop this curse was a white woman asking questions. Like a determined white woman asking questions is gonna solve this.
What I also want to know is, Naomi Watts is beautiful. Her ex was a very handsome dude. Why this kid so creepy? Why this kid so unlikable and creepy, and just like, I don't know, just an ugly child, dare I say? I don't know. I feel bad talking about that.
There are ugly children out there. I think maybe it's because his father was like, hey, I'm going to be around and talk to your mom, but have nothing to do with your life. I'm going to stare at you while you're on the playground.
That's a weird
school
element
and not ever talk to you.
Of the movie, we meet Noah. He's in a couple scenes before we learn, and maybe you assume, but they set it up like it's a twist or a reveal where she's like, our son watched the tape, and then it's like cut. So that information has not been revealed and is supposed to kind of be like, whoa. Because there's that weird scene where, first of all, this kid gets himself ready for school in the morning. He like leaves, he takes his little umbrella in Seattle and he's walking God knows where.
So creepy.
And he comes across and he looks up at his dad, we don't know at the time is his dad. And they just sort of have like a, all right, see you later. And it's such a weird, it's like, does he know that? It's clearly he does, but they have no relationship. Even, it doesn't even warrant a like head nod or a little like, salutation on their way.
Wait, the kid knows that that's his dad, right?
The kid does, but there's no acknowledgement between either of them that like, they're like, well, I'm going to see your mom, but
I mean, the dad's probably like, every time he sees the kid's like, hey son, and the mind is like, man, why my kid looks so fucked up. Like he's just so scary looking. He looks like a miserable 50-year-old. Like a child that's going through a midlife crisis at age like 10.
Legit.
I think he was left unsaid is that Noah was ready to commit and be a dad and start the nuclear family and get the dog. And then he saw the kid and he's like, I'm out. I'm just going to live in my loft. I'm just going to do video editing.
He was there. He's like, this baby has bags under its eyes. I can't.
I've seen The Omen. I don't need to do this.
Yeah. And it's like, also my loft is pretty nice.
Yeah. I can't have kids. You see those uneven floors? Loft. You can't have a toddler running around those uneven floors. And I'm not going to give up the loft. So unfortunately, the only thing I can do is just not be in this kid's life. But I'm not going to move.
Okay. We've talked about both these movies. We've talked about this creepy ass little kid being left. Let's get into these criterias just to get it out of the way, and we can get down to Peter's decision. I'm feeling good about mine. We'll see. The first thing is influence on pop culture.
We just talked about The Ring a lot.
The Ring has a huge influence on pop culture, and movies like Audition and like all these other creepy Japanese movies for sure have influence on The Ring, but it started a whole genre of movies in the U.S., horror movies in the U.S., so I think we all know that. I don't know if Tales from the Hood has a very huge pop culture influence. I feel like, not huge, but has a decent
more of a cult following, yeah.
Yes, in the black community for sure. Just the shit, knee deep in the shit. You're in the shit now. Like Clarence Williams, man, shout out to him again one more time. Just like amazing.
I should slightly recant my earlier confession of never having heard like anything about this movie. I recognized Clarence Williams the third, I believe is that. Yeah, Clarence Williams. I didn't know his name was Mr. Sims. I didn't know exactly what he was, but like the hair and the look and his like being
He's
was
also
very
in Half Baked. That's another like big.
Oh, okay. Maybe I have seen Half Baked, so that might have been a Half Baked.
So that's where you might be getting it.
But
from.
I feel like if there's a pop culture imprint, a lot of it's around him.
Yes, 1,000%.
And also, maybe this is the Twilight Zone thing. Like in the David Allen Greer story, the second story, with the monster.
Yeah.
They don't title this stories, but it's about a little boy, Walter, who is suffering. He tells his teacher that there's a monster that comes and hurts him at night, and he shows up at school with a black eye or like a burn on his hand where someone's grabbed him. And he does that thing where he like makes like almost voodoo drawings. He'll just draw people in class like the bully that was beating him up, and then he crumbles the paper, and then you hear off screen, or in the case of David Allen Greer later, their bodies like collapse or like
that was actually looked really fucking cool.
It was cool.
That did look cool.
And but I feel like that. I'm not saying it's ripping it. I think it's a comment. Like that felt like I've seen that before somewhere else. I guess I don't know if it's pop culture as related to that movie, but that feels like a thing that we've seen. In horror movies.
Pop culture. I feel like The Ring has such a huge pop culture influence with the phone call. And
7 Days, phone, the videotape. Scary Movie 3 is like an extended parody of this movie.
Yeah.
I like Scary Movie 3, and I think I like Scary Movie 3 because I like The Ring, and I was there for all those Ring jokes.
Yeah, I watched The Ring years after it come out, so Scary Movie 3, I don't even think I finished it because I was just like, I don't know what the fuck's going on with this movie. The first two I loved. All right, next one. How well do these movies hold up? I feel like both of these movies hold up pretty well, honestly.
Your movie, we've talked about the ways that it was sort of prescient. I think, not to take away that point, but I think it's also the sad reality of the fact that like it's not necessarily that it saw the future. I think it just saw the now, and the now hasn't changed.
The now hasn't changed.
Good point.
But I was feeling a little bit of and I don't know if Jordan Peele has ever talked about it, but the last scene, the rehabilitation, like where the Crazy K is strapped to a chair and is lowered into a room. I was getting excited. He's also like naked and kind of. I was getting Sunken Place kind of Get Out.
Honestly, I don't think Get Out gets made if this movie doesn't. I don't know if it had any influence on it, but I feel like it had to.
And the idea of a horror movie trying to be that while also having a lot to say about like the Black experience, and that is obviously, you would say Get Out owes a little bit to that. I think this movie is trying to do the same thing.
Got to. I mean, both films, I think what they have, Get Out and Tales from the Hood, is that I think they beautifully involve the social injustice aspect. What the fuck was that? Sorry. The social injustice aspect.
You just got an email from Samara.
Yeah. Hold on, let me see. On 7 days. Okay, cool. All right, I'll see y'all later, man. I gotta
go live.
Yeah, I gotta go live for 7 days. No, but I thought they seamlessly did that, and that's what I love about Tales from the Hood. They did it in such a good way. I don't know. It didn't feel preachy. It just felt very, I don't know, important. It's like it's just something that looking back now, I realize that it's a really important film.
Yeah. And then, Liv, this is a slight detour maybe, but I did want to ask you, I feel like I know you well enough where I can say, how close were you to picking Get Out?
I was very
as your pick for this. Instead.
And because this is a competition based podcast, and we don't appreciate films as art. Film can only be appreciated in that one is better than another one. Films are made to beat other movies. But the reason why we started this podcast, the whole like cultural blind spots and talking about things and our experiences growing up and how they can be different. When you told me you hadn't seen this movie, had never even heard of it, I knew then that I was going to choose this. But in the fact that
I appreciate you using your picks to educate, and me, I'm like, I haven't seen this one in a while.
But Get Out was hard, but it was just like, it was such a good movie, and I feel like it's such an easy pick, and everybody knows.
Yeah, it's almost a trap.
Yeah, exactly. So I was just like, I was thinking 28 Days Later. I was thinking there's this French horror movie that I really liked when I was a little bit younger, but I went with this because
Matilda. What's the French movie?
It's some like movie where these two girls are like go visit their parents and like they're getting chased by this dude the whole time, and then there's like a twist at the end. It's basically like this one girl is like in love with this other girl and they're like friends, and she thinks she's like helping her and saving her from this dude that's murdering them and like along the way, but the entire time it's her. She's been like causing all this.
Oh, I know. Is it called Blue is the Warmest Color?
Yeah.
Have you guys seen that?
No, I haven't.
I haven't seen it.
But you've heard of it?
Yes.
It's the most sexual film I've ever seen. Like, there's so much gratuitous sex in this film that even I, someone who loves gratuitous sex, was like, I'm bored. I don't want to see. I want story. I'm tired of these two people just constantly eating each other out on camera. But you know, this is about a horror movie, so I won't bring that up. But
I'm gonna have to check that out. I'm gonna check that out.
Leonard's actually starting it now. It's out on a separate
I think
laptop
it's rated
window.
X, believe it or not. Straight up.
I feel like The Ring still holds up. Very creepy. Still works. It does feel very like 2002, 2001.
It dates
with the
itself
phones
in
and
all the ways that
has
you would
to.
if you made a movie about a killer
There's
video
tapes
cassette.
and phones.
Like, it would have been funny if there was at the end of the Ring video. This is a hokey joke, but like if there was like Be Kind Rewind or something. Like there's a lot of those kind of.
I never even thought about that. Who's rewinding this tape for the next person?
Yeah.
And then maybe a little thing in the end says like streaming will never pick up or streaming will never take off.
It is good that they didn't lean in more where she like tries to return it to a Blockbuster as like something else, and they're like, no, we at Blockbuster. Like, they didn't get that in the bed.
Did you make a copy of this? This is theft. That is theft. You're not allowed to make copies of VHSs.
All right, I'm here to return Dodgeball and The English Patient, and I'll just give you guys this one back too. We don't take that too, lady. No way.
We've got that tape before, lady. Okay, yeah,
we're good on that.
We keep losing staff. They put it on in the store, and then later everybody's dead, and then I don't have anybody to work on Saturday.
Take you and your creepy ass son and get the fuck out of here.
Never again.
He's just walking into the adults only section.
The most important criteria this season was Luis Guzman in either one of our films.
Should we go back and explain what this is for Peter? I mean,
Peter
it's a pretty clear question that can be answered very quickly.
And every season we always like to
we pick a new guy,
a new character. So now it's kind of more of a character actor. People that you've seen in dozens and dozens of movies of all types of genres over years long. Season 1 was Samuel L. Jackson.
Judging the eras from which we make our picks, late 80s, 90s, 2000s, today. Sound like a radio DJ. And who's most likely to be a character actor to show up? Samuel L. Jackson is like the GOAT of that.
Yes.
Of being in like movies for small or big parts. So this season it's Luis Guzman.
Yeah, season 2 was Gary Oldman.
Yep.
And then season 3 was Steve Buscemi.
And how often have we select these guys at the beginning of the season before we know our picks? How often have they actually shown up in the movies that we pick?
Like once a
Almost
season.
never.
Almost never.
It's the kiss of death.
Yeah, it's the kiss of death. So hopefully Luis Guzman gets in here in one of these movies. We'll see. He hasn't been in either one of our...
He's not in either of these, yeah.
No.
I feel like Luis Guzman could have been good in Tales from the Hood at some capacity.
Luis Guzman, it's surprising to me that he was not in Tales from the Hood.
He could have maybe been like a reporter or something in the racist governor. We didn't talk about the old Southern black man. It's like those dolls, that was so fucking funny.
Or just when he like is beating a puppet, not the old man.
He's beating the puppet.
He's beating a puppet to death with the American flag, shouting "No reparations!" And that was when it first dawned on me that this movie might be about something a little bit more than what's on the surface.
I don't know. Luis Guzman can't be in the ring because no minorities are allowed to be in this movie, apparently. So,
unfortunately, no. I mean, we can't place him into a movie that seems to have excluded non-white people, but I don't know that his vibe. Luis Guzman's kind of like a one of one. He's kind of funny, but he's kind of.
I
I don't know how he fits in the ring, which is a very specific
Luis
style.
Guzman living on that island, and he'd be like, "You don't want to go to that house. Don't go to that house over there, man. They're weird over there, man." Like I could just see him being like,
Just some character that warns her, like, don't go to that island.
Yeah, or like maybe when the horse jumps off the ferry,
Oh, he, like,
Luis
works on the
Guzman's
ferry.
looking down, and he's like, "Shit!" Like that would have been like
Yeah,
one line.
He had one line, and then when they walk away, and then he has a joke like, "What's up with that kid?" And then that's it.
"Yeah, exactly. That's all you need from him."
I would have liked actually him to be the teacher, like where he's like, he drew that before she died, like that. Just make that.
The
Luis
teacher
Guzman.
was
That
black,
could be
and
fun.
I like how she was just
Oh,
like,
shit,
nah.
I'm replacing the
She's
one
like, I got
minority
these
in the movie
receipts,
then.
motherfucker.
Yeah.
Yeah, he drew that a week ago. God damn it. your kid is a creep, okay?
I do
Let's
like
talk
because she's
about
just
it.
like, it's fine. He's processing it. He's not going to talk about it. Let him draw this shit, and he'll get it out of his system. And she's like, okay, I think that there's both of these movies have concerned teachers reaching out to seemingly neglectful parents,
Right.
being like, your kid's fucked up, and they're like, don't worry about it.
Don't worry.
It's all good.
He'll be fine. He's going through something. No, we're telling you, he's creeping all the other kids out. He's drawing these crazy ass little fucking circle things. Open your eyes, lady.
I do imagine when he's at school, no one's at his table. Like everybody else is just doubling up on projects, and he's just spaced out. When you're like real young, you'd be like 4 at a table or something, scattered around the room. No one's sitting with this kid.
No one. He's by himself. All right.
So that would have been if Luis Guzman was in either of these movies, Peter. Maybe if you were on the fence about what movie to pick, you could have used that as something of a tiebreaker. But he's in neither, so we'll move on.
Doesn't work. Yeah, unfortunately.
We'll go. If he was what? Sorry, I cut you off.
No, I'm just gonna say if he was, the choice would be very easy.
Yeah, it would tip the scales.
So easy.
Absolutely. Immediately.
This one's a quick one we can just go right through because we already know the disparity of stats and ratings between black movies and white movies.
Yes.
Critics never like black movies. But Tales from the Hood is a 6.4 on IMDb. It's a 52% on Rotten Tomatoes, which I feel like is disrespectful. The budget was $6 million. Also, something I noted while reading about Tales from the Hood, it was non-union. They made this movie non-union, Tales from the Hood, for $6 million, and they made $11.8 million. I feel like that's a win. In 95.
I mean, they definitely made their money back.
Yeah, so they made their money. They made twice, twofold.
And they're making savings by being a non-union production. So they probably, who knows where else they've cut corn.
Yeah, so
Then how are all these like well-known union actors in it?
I don't know, man. I don't know. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe
There's a
someone
non-union crew, or no? Would the cast have to be union? I don't know how that works exactly.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
I read doing some research that apparently it was non-union. That's crazy to me.
I mean,
Wow.
It's obvious the studio didn't want to give it a big budget. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't want to put a lot of money towards it.
It's also, this is stats adjacent. You talked about remembering seeing this movie in theaters, Peter.
Yeah,
Do you remember that it came out at the end of May? Like, what an inopportune time to be launching this very Halloween kind of spooky centric
Wow,
movie.
I didn't know that.
May, huh? Yeah, I guess.
May 20th. Yeah, I don't actually expect you, but like that's weird to me. May 25th or May 24th, I think it came out.
Yeah,
It's
I
not a
don't
Memorial
think it
Day
was-
weekend movie.
No, and I don't think it was associated with Halloween at the time, too. I mean, it's a horror movie, so I know it sounds weird
Yeah.
to say it doesn't, but like,
It's nothing explicitly Halloween, but
Yes,
it just feels
definitely.
like that time of year you might be more, when it gets dark early, you might be more, not when you're like going to the beach.
right. Another thing is, I don't think like, it probably wasn't marketed properly. Like if you look at the trailer still, it makes it look a little bit like cheesy,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
but the film itself has some funny, cheesy moments, but it's definitely not a cheesy. It's like a much more deeper film than the trailer or that whole the way the campaign was presented it.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah, they did a disservice to that for sure. The Ring obviously was marketed very heavily. It had a $48 million budget, made $249 million.
Ooh.
Yeah, I know, right? For a horror movie, that's pretty damn good in 2002. What are their rankings on IMDb and whatnot? Do you have that?
It has a 7.1 on IMDb. I'm looking up the Rotten Tomatoes now. 71%. That's
Okay.
funny. Which feels right. I remember this movie being popular and also well received. Like, it was one of those movies that people are like, it's also good, because some movies, especially horror movies,
Yeah.
they can make some money or get some, but people don't actually. This is crazy. I'm now, the IMDb or the Rotten Tomatoes page is loading. The tomato meter, which is I think the official critics whatever, is 71%. That's fresh. The audience score for The Ring, and I guess this movie obviously predates Rotten Tomatoes, but the audience score is 48%.
I kind of can believe that.
This movie feels like more of a crowd pleaser to me. If you like horror,
I
feels
think
like
it probably got hyped. It's a movie that's very hyped, and it is kind of slow. It is the middle's a little slow, and it's more the detective aspect and like noir weird thing. So I think maybe it's just younger people being like, "Oh, this is some scary horror movie," and like not getting what they wanted.
There's also, we should at least acknowledge, I have not seen Ringu, which is the original Japanese film on which it's based. I've heard people say that that's the version, but I couldn't pick that. This was the way that I was introduced to these movies, and I haven't seen it. So maybe there's a little bit of that. Like, this is the unfavorable American remake of this kind of classic J-horror movie. I don't know.
No,
I know some people feel that way about The Departed, where I also haven't seen
about like
that.
Old Boy, like the original Old Boy. The Japanese version of Old Boy is so fucking good, and Spike Lee made his version, and it's just not as good. It's not. It's a different movie. But
well, can we, one more thing, I guess, about maybe this goes back to, does it hold up? But before we get into our final arguments, like, another thing I wanted to mention that I think it popularized, other than just Japanese horror knockoffs proliferating throughout Hollywood after it, is the way that Samara moves, the girl in the well.
yeah,
It's Samara, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I think they remove frames from when she's moving, which makes her movement very like herky jerky. Obviously, there are moments where she'll just appear across the room. They just cut. But like, I think they take frames out of her movements to make it look all very like kind of like old animation, and it's very effective and creepy.
Yeah. That whole thing, like, who was the director?
Gore Verbinski, who a year later made Pirates of the Caribbean: The Curse of the Black Pearl. This guy, get you a guy that has range. Both these movies work for different reasons. But yeah, it feels like a Hollywood studio move. Gore Verbinski he knows what he's doing. I don't know, maybe they pulled the removing pieces of film from the original as well, but it works. And a lot of people were doing it after.
Very well. Yeah, it for sure got copied by a lot of other directors. And here we are. We're at the final moment, the final criteria.
Day 7.
Peter's going to come through this laptop and strangle one of us. That's the person who loses.
Which horror movie was better? We will give our final arguments to you, Peter, and then you will tell us your thought process and then give us your answer.
All right.
Do you want to go first, Quinn, or you want me to go first?
You've won the last 2 seasons, Leonard. You go first.
Okay, I'll go first. The genre of these movies were horror. We both picked very good movies. Quinn's movie is a very creepy movie. One of the classic, more popular horror movies. And I can't really say anything too bad about it. It falls under the category. It's done pretty well. But for me, Tales from the Hood resonates with me because it's not your classic horror story, but from a cultural point of view, being a black person in America is a horror story. We have to deal with terrifying things, and as a parent, as a sibling and family members, you're always worrying about if your family member is going to come back home to you. You're always like, it's a black thing, man. It's like, stay safe, man. Stay safe out there. Let me know when you get home. So it's like, it's a movie, but the undertones of it is truth. Like, all of the scariest thing in life is the truth. And that is being a black person in America. It fucking is tough, man. And my entire life, I always expected that I wasn't even going to make it past 30. Like, genuinely. I was like, all right, if I make it past 30, that's great. Like, and it's fucked up that as a black person, you have to feel that way. And this movie encapsulates that, and it encapsulates a lot of things, but with a funny, undertone where it's like, it's another part of the black experience. We have to be funny to get through all this bullshit and drama that we have to deal with every single day, and these horrific images that we see that other people's don't see, to survive and keep it pushing. So I think if you're looking at it from that viewpoint, I think Tales from the Hood is the better horror movie. I'm sorry to use race, but
yeah, let me just think about how to reply to those points. Pitch this movie about a creepy girl. Yeah, I likewise, I can't disagree with anything you just said.
It's not a traditional
I really can't
horror.
disagree with anything you just
it's
said.
not a traditional horror, and it's a tough argument to argue against.
This reminds me, if I may, and maybe I may not, but Peter wasn't there. We had a prompt last season, Peter, where Leonard and I picked. It was best summer movie, and I'll be quick about this, but I picked Jaws, and Leonard picked Do the Right Thing, and I won't even say who won because it's not important, but I think my argument then is somewhat similar to my argument now. And my argument then was like, Do the Right Thing may well be, I think you can argue a bit in terms of what the movies are talking about, the more important film with a lot more to say. But there's that thing of when you hear best summer movie, or in this case, best horror movie, what do you think about? And I think my argument then was that I don't necessarily, and I'm white and you're, we can view things differently. That's kind of the whole point of this podcast. But I think about going to the beach and catching sharks. And I think in this, The Ring for me, it was like kind of a slam dunk. There were a couple other movies that I was thinking about picking, but I was like, this movie, quite simply, don't overthink it, scared the pants off of me. And maybe it was as scary for you guys, maybe it wasn't, but like, I think this movie is only trying to do really one thing. It's trying to horrify you. It's trying to scare you. Tales from the Hood, it's trying to do that. I think it's trying to do a lot of things. If I would come at any element of the movie, and I appreciate small productions, and I appreciate that they made do with a lot less budget-wise than did The Ring. But there were times where I felt a little bit like it was like the production level of sort of like one of those like R.L. Stine, like Goosebumps kind of things that you might have seen like on the Disney Channel, like rented those VHSs as a kid, where like, we were going to the Tower of London and when we come back, it's the 1800s. Like there was the hokier elements of it, like down to the fact where like when some of the characters, like the blood was too red, it was an independent production, or it felt that way. And I think what is so effective about The Ring, which we talked about a little bit, was that sense of atmosphere and dread. And like the second she watches the movie, the next scene kind of counts down and it's like day one. There's that building sort of sense of dread. I can't argue that there are parts in the middle of the movie where it's slow. We are kind of just waiting for Samara to come back. But even the moments where she's finding out about her, watching those videotapes of her as a little, watching the footage of her as a little girl when she's in like a mental asylum, I do think they build out enough of the mythology, not about how the tape is made, but about like her family and the fact that all the horses were dying. There's enough a kind of persistent, creepy vibe. And I think it's very effectively shot. I think there's a reason all those tropes became ever present of like the ringing phone and the creepy child that scares you. And I'm not a sleepwalker, but I used to take a running jump to my bed after I saw this movie. Because even though I know she operates through televisions, the rules are clear. I was afraid Samara was going to grab at my ankles when I was trying to get into bed. I don't know that some of the undoubtedly more important issues that Tales from the Hood is coming. I don't know that you're checking under your bed for them in the same way. So I think if you're interpreting it as like what movie scares you, I would still say it's The Ring. I mean, what movie maybe has you leaving the theater or turning off the TV with more to think about? I think that might be your movie. I feel that mine is perhaps better suited for the prompt. But it's not our decision to make, Leonard. We've talked about these movies to death. We've pitched their virtues. But Peter, if you're ready and take all the time you need, what did you think? Who did the better job of picking a movie today?
Well, okay.
And if you have questions but it's all you.
Here's I think what makes it difficult is that they're very different from each other.
Mm-hmm.
The vibe is very different from each other. And I think the reasoning behind even why the filmmakers made these films is so different from each other. I would say in terms of horror, when I think about what's best horror, I think about how did it make me feel in terms of horror? Did it scare me? Did it creep me out? Did it weird me out? I think in that case, I would probably go with, and you guys both made great arguments. So I really can't say who made the better argument. I can only say whose argument I can relate to more. And I think, Quinn, I think I would say that overall, The Ring is the better horror movie because it has the basic horror movie tropes.
Right.
The more important film, without a doubt, is Tales from the Hood. And I think it's unfortunate that a lot of people have never seen it, never even heard of it, because it's a special film. It came out during a time where like they probably had to go through so much shit to make this film. And then finally, when they finally got a greenlit, they're like, all right, but you're only going to get a $6 million budget. Well, oh, great. Now we have to go on union for crew, cast, whoever. Also, I have a personal, like when I watch The Ring, it doesn't make me go like, oh man, nostalgic for 2002, you know. But when I watched Tales from the Hood, like it really made me nostalgic for a certain time. And so which movie do I generally overall like better? Tales from the Hood. Which one's a better pure horror? I think The Ring.
And you
I
know
feel
what?
like I just got that one. I like just grabbed that brass ring
argument.
from you.
It's a great argument.
Though that is a great. No, that's a great. I think
it's
I think
a valid
you summed it up
argument.
perfectly, Peter.
Yeah, it is the better horror movie. And honestly, I'm not mad about losing this one because I wanted you to see this movie and I wanted to do it on the podcast so we could talk about it and that maybe our listeners who probably have never even heard of this movie will go and listen and watch this movie.
It is. I am constantly a few times every season amazed of movies that are like foundational for you in some way I've never heard of. Because even if you haven't seen the movie that I'm giving you on a given week, you're like, yeah, I know that movie. I remember that. And I think that's part of that thing we talk about is like white movies are, in quotes, for everyone. Black movies are niche. You know, no reason to market this black movie, Tales from the Hood. And I was also a bit younger when it came out, but like, I don't think it would have been playing in the commercials or on the TV channels I was watching or whatever. You know, you have to find these movies. So yeah, I appreciate you shining a spotlight on it. And now I'll never be able to get Clarence Williams the third out of my head.
Nice. I mean, he's so good in that. I would honestly recommend anybody who's a fan of horror, even fantasy genres, they should definitely check out Tales from the Hood. Because I've seen The Ring maybe 3 times in my life, but I've seen Tales from the Hood probably like 30 times in my life. It's easier for me to go back to Tales from the Hood than to go back to The Ring. And I actually think it's because The Ring is creepier and weirder, but Tales from the Hood is funnier and just has so many more layers and it's sillier. So there's parts of it that you go, whoa, it's a little disturbing, but other parts of it, it's like funny. And so I don't know. To me, it's certainly the bigger and better achievement, in my opinion.
So in a way, everyone wins.
Yeah.
But in a more specific way, I've won, Leonard, and I've won the first week, and
Quinn,
I'm trying to get off the.
You needed it, Quinn.
I needed it
win.
more. I needed it more.
You started out last season with a win, and we all know what happened.
Peter, we do these things where each episode has a winner, and then at the end of the season, whoever has more wins is the overall winner, and the loser gets punished.
Well, show him your shirt you're wearing right now.
I don't need. He doesn't need to know what my shirt is. Leonard made me this shirt, which has my name on it, and then the biggest text in the whole shirt is "loser."
Oh, man,
and he's making me wear it when we record.
And
he's
if
wearing
you'll see the
his
shirt I'm wearing.
Nice. Okay, so if at the end of the season, if Quinn, you're the winner, then you trade shirts.
Yeah. I might have to make him a shirt.
Okay.
It's a weird punishment that Leonard made me a shirt. Like I just have an extra shirt now because I lost. It's not the worst thing in the world. I wish it didn't say Quinn Boys Loser on it. I don't know if I'm going to want to wear it to the park. Or anything, but,
That's the whole point.
Especially the park, yeah.
The park is where I go, where I show off my new shirts. I'm in the
Right.
park. I'm strutting, and people are commenting on it.
Peter, it's been great having you on.
Yes,
Hey, man,
Peter.
thank
Thank
you
you
so
so
much
much for
for having
watching
me.
these movies.
What's going on with you? Where can the people find you?
I'm on Instagram. Please find me and follow me at pbani, PBANI on Instagram. And yeah, man, it was a blast talking to you fellas. I love horror movies. I love movies in general. So talking about them always turns me on.
I'm gonna
back to that.
He,
Gotta return some
I think he's
videotapes.
already started in the blue. What is it? Deep in the blue? Something.
Blue is the warmest color.
Blue is the
Yeah,
warmest
and
color.
also go watch Blue is the warmest color.
Well, you know what? This was a great way to start off season 4. I'm excited about some guests we have. The guests we have this season. It's gonna be a fun season. It's gonna be a great one.
And we'll talk about what that prompt is. We'll release that on our socials. If you haven't, you can follow FVF Podcast on Instagram and Twitter. And until that time, this has been a great season. I'm on cloud 9. I feel like I've just copied the videotape and made someone on death row watch it. I'm free. I got 7 days before I have to worry about getting another W, Leonard. So thank you again, Peter. Thank you,
so
Leonard.
much, fellas. Thank you.
Thanks
fellas.
to Samara. Until then, we'll see you in 7 days.
At the cinema, 70s.